23 miles of water separate Virginia's eastern shore from Virginia Beach. To cross the Chesapeake Bay, drivers can take a ferry. Or they can drive across one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the 20th century, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge-Tunnel. It opened on April 15, 1964. On opening day, thousands of cars lined up to cross the 17.6-mile span. Newspapers celebrated it as one of the 7 engineering wonders of the modern world. President Lyndon Johnson sent a telegram of congratulations. The American Society of Civil Engineers called it the outstanding civil engineering achievement of 1965. But here's what most people don't know. During the 4 years of construction, at least 7 workers died building the bridge-tunnel. Some were crushed by machinery. Some drowned. Some died from decompression sickness working in the underwater tunnels. And at least 3 workers simply disappeared, listed as having quit their jobs, but never seen again. Their families never received closure, never got answers. The construction company and the state government worked very hard to minimize these deaths. Families were pressured to accept quick financial settlements to avoid lawsuits. News coverage of the accidents was minimal. And today, most people who drive across the bridge-tunnel have no idea that 7 men died to build it. This is the story of those workers and the hidden cost of one of America's greatest engineering achievements.
The Chesapeake Bay has always been both a resource and a barrier. For centuries, communities on Virginia's eastern shore were isolated from the rest of Virginia. Getting to Norfolk or Virginia Beach required taking a ferry across the mouth of the bay. The ferry ride took 90 minutes. In bad weather, the ferries couldn't run. During World War II, when military personnel needed to move quickly between bases on the eastern shore and the mainland, the ferry became a serious bottleneck. After the war ended, the ferry system continued struggling. Traffic increased. Wait times at the ferry dock stretched for hours during peak season. Business leaders and politicians on the eastern shore began calling for a permanent bridge or tunnel. In the 1950s, engineers studied the problem. A traditional bridge across the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay was impossible. The bay is too wide and too deep. Ocean-going ships needed access to Norfolk's ports. A bridge high enough to clear the largest ships would be impractically tall. The alternative was tunnels. But tunneling beneath the bay for 17 miles was prohibitively expensive. Engineers proposed a hybrid solution, a combination of bridges, tunnels, and man-made islands. The design would include low-level bridge sections where water was shallow and shipping traffic was minimal. Where the shipping channels crossed, the road would descend into underwater tunnels. At each end of the tunnels, man-made islands would be constructed to serve as transition points. In 1960, construction began. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge and Tunnel Commission awarded the contract to a consortium of construction companies. The project would cost $200 million. It would take 4 years, and it would require thousands of workers laboring in some of the most dangerous conditions imaginable. Building artificial islands in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, sinking massive tunnel sections into the ocean floor, working in compressed air chambers deep underwater. The engineering was groundbreaking. The risks were enormous.
The construction process began with building the 2 artificial islands. These islands, later named Thimble Shoal Island and Fisherman Island, would serve as portals for the tunnel sections. Building them required dumping 8 million tons of rock and sand into the Chesapeake Bay. Massive barges carried loads of granite from quarries in Virginia and North Carolina. The rock was dumped in precise locations to create the foundations of the islands. The work was relentless. Barges operated 24 hours a day. Weather conditions in the bay were unpredictable and often brutal. Storms could appear with little warning. Waves could reach heights of 10 to 15 feet during nor'easters. Workers on the barges faced constant danger from shifting cargo, rough seas, and heavy machinery operating in tight quarters. The first recorded death occurred in 1961. A worker on one of the rock barges was crushed when a load of granite shifted during unloading. The barge lurched in rough water. Several tons of rock slid across the deck. The worker had no time to escape. He was killed instantly. The construction company reported the death as an unfortunate accident. The worker's family was offered a financial settlement. The amount was not disclosed. Local newspapers published a brief obituary. The construction continued without pause. The tunnel construction presented different but equally deadly challenges. 2 tunnels, each approximately 1 mile long, would pass beneath the main shipping channels. The tunnels were constructed on land, then floated into position and sunk to the ocean floor. Workers had to prepare the trench on the ocean floor, where the tunnel sections would rest. This required underwater excavation using massive dredges. Divers worked at depths of 60 to 80 feet. They operated in near-zero visibility. The Chesapeake Bay's water is murky from sediment and algae. Divers reported being unable to see their own hands in front of their faces. They worked by feel. In these conditions, accidents were inevitable. In 1962, a diver working on the tunnel trench preparation died from decompression sickness. Decompression sickness, commonly called the bends, occurs when divers ascend too quickly from depth. Nitrogen gas that has dissolved in the bloodstream under pressure forms bubbles as pressure decreases. These bubbles can block blood vessels, causing paralysis, unconsciousness, and death. The diver had been working at 70 feet depth for over an hour. When he surfaced, he immediately complained of severe pain in his joints and chest. He was placed in a decompression chamber, but the treatment came too late. He died within hours. The official cause of death was listed as a diving accident, but workers at the site said the diver had been rushed. The construction schedule was tight. Divers were under pressure to complete their work quickly. Safety protocols were sometimes bypassed to save time. The most troubling deaths involved workers who simply disappeared. Between 1960 and 1964, at least 3 workers were listed in company records as having quit their jobs. But their families later reported that they had never come home. No forwarding address, no contact, no body. One family filed a missing persons report with local police. The investigation went nowhere. The construction company said the worker had simply left the job. Perhaps he had decided to move somewhere else. Perhaps he had personal problems. The police closed the case. The family never got answers. To this day, there are families who believe their relatives died during the bridge-tunnel construction, but were never officially counted among the casualties. There were also near disasters that could have killed dozens. In October 1962, a hurricane passed near the construction site. Winds reached 80 miles per hour. Waves crashed over the partially completed artificial islands. Several barges broke loose from their moorings. One barge, loaded with construction equipment, drifted into the partially completed bridge section and struck one of the support pilings. The impact damaged the piling and nearly caused a collapse of that bridge section. Workers were evacuated just in time. If the collapse had occurred with workers on the bridge, dozens could have been killed. The incident was reported in local newspapers, but the severity of the near disaster was downplayed. The construction company emphasized that no one was injured. They didn't mention how close they had come to catastrophe.
The environmental destruction caused by the bridge-tunnel destruction is a story that has been almost completely erased from official histories. The Chesapeake Bay is one of the most productive estuaries in North America. It supports vast populations of oysters, crabs, and fish. Local watermen had harvested seafood from the bay for generations. Their families had fished the same oyster beds for over 100 years. But the bridge-tunnel construction destroyed many of these oyster beds. The rock and sand dumped to create the artificial islands smothered entire sections of the bay bottom. The dredging operations stirred up sediment that settled over oyster beds miles away. Water quality declined. Oyster populations collapsed. Hundreds of watermen lost their livelihoods. They had no choice but to find other work. Some moved away. Some tried fishing in different areas, but the damage was permanent. The oyster beds never fully recovered. The watermen received minimal compensation. The state government argued that the economic benefits of the bridge-tunnel outweighed the loss of a few oyster beds. The watermen argued that their way of life had been destroyed. Their families had fished the bay for generations. That history meant nothing to the government planners who saw only economic progress and transportation efficiency. The official death toll of 7 workers has been questioned by historians and former construction workers. Some workers who were there claim the real number was higher. They remember accidents that were never officially reported. A worker who fell from a bridge section into the water and was never found. a worker who was severely injured and died weeks later in a hospital whose death was attributed to complications from a pre-existing condition rather than a workplace accident. A worker who was crushed by equipment and whose family was paid off quickly to avoid publicity. These deaths, if they occurred, were systematically excluded from the official record.
On April 15, 1964, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge-Tunnel officially opened. The opening ceremony was attended by thousands. Virginia Governor Albertus Harrison led a convoy of cars across the bridge-tunnel. Speeches celebrated the achievement. Engineers were praised. Politicians took credit. The construction companies were commended for completing the project on time and within budget. But the ceremony said nothing about the workers who died. It said nothing about the families who lost sons, fathers, and brothers. It said nothing about the watermen whose livelihoods were destroyed. The narrative was entirely about progress and achievement. The bridge-tunnel was an immediate success. Traffic exceeded projections. Tourists came from across the country to drive across what was being called one of the 7 engineering wonders of the modern world. The eastern shore was no longer isolated. Real estate values on the eastern shore increased. Businesses prospered. From an economic perspective, the bridge-tunnel was everything its supporters had promised. But that economic success came at a cost that was never properly acknowledged. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge-Tunnel has become an iconic piece of American infrastructure. Over 50 years after it opened, it remains one of the most impressive engineering achievements in the United States. Millions of people have driven across it. Many consider it one of the most beautiful drives in America. The experience of crossing open water with nothing but the horizon visible in every direction is genuinely awe-inspiring. But behind that beauty lies a forgotten history. 7 workers died building it, maybe more. Their names are not displayed anywhere on the bridge-tunnel. There's no memorial, no plaque, no acknowledgement that they existed. In recent years, efforts have been made to document the workers who built the bridge-tunnel. Local historians have interviewed former construction workers. They've collected photographs and documents. They've tried to identify the workers who died. But the records are incomplete. The construction companies kept minimal documentation. Many of the records that did exist have been lost or destroyed. The families of the workers who died have tried to get official recognition. But the Chesapeake Bay and Tunnel Commission has shown little interest. The official narrative remains focused on the engineering achievement. The human cost remains minimized. The Chesapeake Bridge-Tunnel stands today as a monument to human engineering and ambition. But it's also a monument to sacrifice that was never properly honored. 7 workers died, maybe more. Their families never got full closure.
The watermen, whose livelihoods were destroyed, never received adequate compensation. The environmental damage was permanent, and the official history of the bridge-tunnel barely mentions any of this. The narrative has always been about progress, about achievement, about connecting communities and promoting economic growth. Those are real accomplishments, but they came at a cost that America has never been willing to fully acknowledge. The most troubling question remains unanswered. How many workers actually died during construction? Were there really only 7, or were there more deaths that were covered up? What happened to the workers who disappeared? Why were their families never given answers? Why has there never been a serious effort to document the true human cost of this project? These questions matter because they're not just about one bridge tunnel. They're about how America tells the story of its infrastructure. Every bridge, every tunnel, every highway was built by human hands. Many of those workers sacrificed their health, their safety, and sometimes their lives. But their stories are rarely told. Their names are rarely remembered. If you want to uncover more hidden stories of American infrastructure, subscribe to Hidden America. Next time, we'll explore the construction of the interstate highway system and discover the neighborhoods that were destroyed to build it. We'll investigate the environmental disasters that were covered up. We'll meet the families whose homes were demolished for progress. And we'll ask why America continues to prioritize infrastructure over the people who build it and the communities it affects. Subscribe now for more hidden infrastructure stories. And the next time you cross a bridge or drive through a tunnel, remember the workers who built it. Remember that behind every engineering marvel, there may be stories of sacrifice that no one wants to tell. Stories that deserve to be remembered.